A vast dark shadow appeared on the horizon, and as it grew closer, the sky seemed to shudder with the power of its presence. Massive alien ships filled the heavens, their silhouettes cutting across the stars. As they drew closer to Earth, their weapons primed, their purpose unknown to the world below. The inhabitants of Earth watched in awe and terror as these mysterious invaders filled the sky. The first ships broke through the atmosphere like meteorites burning bright in the atmosphere, before plunging into the ocean with explosive force waves crashing against the coasts, sending shockwaves through cities, the ground trembling beneath them. People ran through the streets, eyes wide with panic, as the alien armada settled into orbit, their colossal form blotting out the sun. Entire fleets of ships appeared in moments, cutting through the air like knives in the sky. The sound of their arrival reverberated through every corner of Earth, a low hum followed by an eerie silence that lasted only a few moments before all hell broke loose. Earth's first responders scrambled trying to make sense of the attack, but it was already too late. Cities like New York, Paris, London were struck without warning. Massive energy beams from the alien ships tore through buildings as if they were made of paper. The air was filled with screams and confusion. Fires raged across the skyline, and dust filled the streets as people tried to flee. But the alien assault came with brutal precision, and no one could escape the terror that followed. These invaders were not interested in negotiation or peace. Their intentions were clear, and they did not care about the lives of those they encountered. Nothing seemed capable of stopping them. The military mobilized in response, but their weapons were no match for the advanced alien technology. The ships loomed like giants, casting their shadows over the Earth as they picked off targets one by one. In the control centers across the world, military leaders exchanged confused and fearful glances. The scale of the assault was unlike anything they had ever prepared for. Every weapon, every tactic they had ever trained for was useless against an enemy with such power. Earth's defense systems fell within hours as the alien forces systematically disabled satellite systems and knocked out communication lines. Anyone who tried to mount a defense found themselves overwhelmed in mere seconds. The alien ships hovered over the cities in perfect formation, like a predator toying with its prey. Panic spread through the world governments as the realization set in that humanity might not survive this onslaught. The United Nations called for immediate action, but with no plan in sight, the global response was fractured and weak. As civilian populations scattered, there was little hope left. Those who could flee to underground shelters did, but there was no place on Earth that was safe from the aliens' deadly gaze. Yet amidst the chaos and destruction, one thing began to stir in the hearts of humanity, something they had not felt in centuries, a deep and ancient instinct, an unspoken truth that had always been there, waiting for the right moment to surface. It wasn't fear or despair that began to rise, but something stronger, far more dangerous to the invaders, something that would challenge them like nothing they had ever seen before. The human spirit was waking up, and it would soon become clear to the aliens that Earth had a force they could not understand, a force they could not defeat, and that force would not bow under any circumstance. The line had been drawn, and it would never be crossed. As the aliens ravaged the Earth, their ships casting shadows over once proud cities, the world seemed to fall into despair. But in the heart of the chaos, something unexpected happened. It started in Prague, where a small group of people had decided to take matters into their own hands. In the midst of the destruction, Aaron, a former soldier turned street mechanic, watched as the alien forces tore through his neighborhood. His friends and family were gone, taken by the initial strikes. His city was left in ruins, but within him burned a deep need for something more than survival. It was a need to fight back, to do something, anything that would make the invaders understand they had not won yet. Aaron had seen the alien ships up close, and though the sight had terrified him, something in his gut told him they were not invincible. He'd grown up learning how to repair machines, how to make the most out of nothing, how to think on his feet when there seemed to be no solution. Maybe those skills could help in this moment. Maybe he wasn't as powerless as he thought. He gathered a small group of survivors, those who had once been his neighbors and his friends, each one with a skill that could be of use. A couple of hackers, a former scientist, a young engineer, and an old professor of history who had a mind full of forgotten tactics and strategies from centuries past. Together, they'd formed a plan, And though they had no weapons, no training, and no support from the governments of the world, they knew they had one thing: the aliens didn't have a desperate will to fight for survival. Under the cover of night, they moved through the streets of the shattered city. Their first objective was a damaged alien command post that was using the remnants of the city's communication infrastructure to relay orders to their fleet. They were weak, vulnerable, and they didn't know the humans were still alive. Not like this, not in such numbers. The resistance would strike first. They had no choice. The group made its way through the wreckage undetected for the most part, using old tactics they'd learned in their youth, sneaking past alien patrols and using the ruins of their city as cover. Their steps were silent, and their hearts raced with every passing moment. But the fear of being caught was less terrifying than the thought of doing nothing, letting their world slip further into ruin. At the alien base, Aaron's team worked quickly. They hacked into the communication network, reprogramming the transmissions to send false information to the alien fleet. Then, using makeshift explosives, they disabled the energy grid powering the base, causing a massive disruption that temporarily disabled their systems. The mission was a success, and though the aliens had no idea who had struck, they would soon learn that the humans were not as easily defeated as they believed. The attack sent a message loud and clear: humans could fight back, and the first sparks of resistance began to spread across the planet. Across the world, scattered groups of survivors began to rise up in the wake of this act of defiance. What had started as a small cell of resistance fighters in Prague turned into a worldwide movement, fueled by the actions of ordinary people who realized that their world was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The aliens were no longer certain that Earth would fall so easily. Their invasion was no longer a simple conquest. It had become a war, and humanity had just declared its first victory. Even if it was only a small one, it was enough to show the aliens one undeniable truth: humanity would not go quietly into the night, and the line that separated the conquerors from the conquered had just begun to shift. The aftermath of the attack on the alien command post was chaotic, but in its wake, something unexpected emerged: a glimmer of hope that spread quickly across the world. The resistance had struck, and the message was clear: humans were not helpless against the invaders. Word of the small victory in Prague spread like wildfire through the remnants of human civilization. And it wasn't long before more groups began to emerge in every corner of the globe. Small pockets of resistance fighters were born out of necessity and desperation. They took shelter in hidden underground bases, in the ruins of cities, or deep within the forests and mountains where the alien forces hadn't yet reached. At first, these pockets of humanity seemed insignificant in the face of such overwhelming force. But as the resistance grew, so did the tactics they employed. Humanity's strength was not in sheer numbers, but in ingenuity and adaptability. The aliens had never encountered an enemy that could think and act with such resourcefulness as the humans. The resistance had no advanced technology to speak of, but what they lacked in firepower, they more than made up for with strategy and resilience. In hidden laboratories across the globe, human engineers and scientists worked tirelessly, using scraps from downed alien ships to develop weapons that could disable or disrupt the invaders' technology. They studied alien systems, learning how to counteract their energy shields and reverse engineer their weapons for use against them. Old military tactics were resurrected from dusty archive. Strategies long forgotten were dusted off and applied to the present war. The humans began to understand that they didn't need to win every battle. They just needed to make the invaders believe they couldn't win at all. Aaron's group, now becoming a key part of the resistance, continued to launch successful guerrilla strikes against alien outposts across Europe. They sabotaged supply lines, crippled alien communication networks, and attacked convoy after convoy of alien soldiers. They were a thorn in the invaders' side, and the more they fought back, the more they realized just how much power they truly had over their own fate. Back on the alien mothership, Admiral Xoreth, leader of the invasion, was growing increasingly frustrated. Reports from his commanders told of small human factions taking down heavily armed patrols or ambushing supply ships with disturbing precision. It wasn't supposed to be this way. The humans had been expected to fold, to cower in fear, And instead they fought back with a ferocity that seemed impossible to understand. How were these fragile creatures so resilient? He thought to himself as he stared out into the starry void. He had underestimated them. In response, the alien forces began to tighten their grip on Earth's major cities, launching larger, more destructive attacks on the survivors to break their will once and for all. Entire populations were eradicated in a single strike. Cities became war zones, with entire districts reduced to rubble as the alien ships unleashed their most devastating weapons. But the humans wouldn't be broken. They simply adapted, moving into the shadows, using the crumbling ruins of their world to hide their movements and continue their resistance. It wasn't just the fighters who kept up the battle either. As every corner of Earth was touched by the conflict, the spirit of defiance burned in the hearts of every human. No matter how far removed from the front lines, they were. Engineers worked to develop new weapons, medics tended to the wounded in secret shelters, civilians repaired and smuggled supplies to the front lines. There was no task too small, no contribution too insignificant. Everyone found a way to resist, to fight, to hold on to the hope that Earth could be saved. The world's resistance forces were growing more organized and more strategic with each passing day, and the aliens, though still powerful, began to realize they were up against something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. The human spirit, once underestimated, was proving to be an enemy that could not be crushed. No matter how much destruction the invaders unleashed, humanity had found its strength, and it was something the aliens would soon come to understand was unstoppable. The conflict between humanity and the alien invaders had reached a critical stage. The invaders were no longer dealing with disorganized pockets of resistance, but a force that was quickly growing more formidable with each passing day. The human spirit, once thought to be weak and fragile, had transformed into something far more dangerous than the invaders had ever expected. Earth's forces, now unified and more strategic, were starting to push back in unexpected ways. It began with the development of a new weapon, a breakthrough discovered by a team of rogue scientists in an underground lab hidden beneath the ruins of a former research facility. They had cracked the code to disable the aliens' technological advantage. The Gleam, as they called it, was a device that could interfere with the energy fields that powered the alien ships and weapons. It was a game changer for the resistance the first time they tested it. A small group of human fighters managed to disable a fleet of alien patrol ships in an uncharted region of space. The ships went dark, their weapons useless for hours, giving the humans the opening they needed to launch a surprise attack. News of the success spread quickly, and it wasn't long before resistance cells worldwide began deploying versions of the Gleam against the invaders' ships, and outposts across Earth. Cities that were once thought to be lost were liberated and secured one by one as the alien forces found themselves vulnerable in ways they hadn't been before. With their advanced technology temporarily rendered useless, the human resistance had found a key weakness, and they wasted no time exploiting it. But the aliens were not stupid, and they soon realized that their greatest advantage had been stripped away. The commanders scrambled to find ways to counteract the Gleam and restore control over their forces. In response, the invaders began deploying their most advanced war machines designed to wipe out human resistance. With terrifying efficiency, they launched aerial bombardments that razed entire cities, sent waves of ground troops to hunt down the human rebels, and activated their most powerful superweapons to turn the tide of battle. In the face of this overwhelming force, the human resistance, instead of folding, fought back with renewed determination, knowing that their victory over the aliens was no longer just a possibility, but something within their grasp. The resistance held tight to the belief that if they could disrupt the alien leadership, if they could reach the heart of their command structure, they could cripple the entire invasion and force the aliens to retreat. The decision was made. A bold and dangerous plan was set into motion. General Murrah Kessler, now recognized as one of the most capable leaders of the resistance, was tasked with overseeing the final assault on the alien mothership. It was a mission that would require everything humanity had and more. She assembled a team of elite soldiers, engineers, and intelligence experts, all ready to sacrifice everything for the chance to win this war. Their objective was clear: infiltrate the alien flagship, disable its command systems, and bring the invasion to an end. Time was running out. The aliens had already begun preparing for their final push, intent on wiping out the remaining human forces and ensuring that their conquest of Earth would be complete. But the Resistance had already seized the initiative, and now the battle would come down to one final strike. The team of rebels, led by General Kessler, began their perilous journey into the heart of the alien fleet. They knew that if they failed, Earth's last chance for survival would be gone, and yet, as they prepared to board their craft and launch the most dangerous mission of their lives, they felt the full weight of humanity's struggle resting on their shoulders. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the very soul of the planet. The tipping point had arrived, and all eyes were on the rebel team, hoping against hope that they would succeed, knowing that their victory or defeat would decide the future of humanity forever. As the rebel team prepared to embark on their daring mission, humanity's leaders gathered in a hidden underground bunker far from the alien forces that had ravaged the surface of Earth. The War Council, a collective of the world's remaining military commanders, resistance leaders, and top scientists, convened in secret, their faces grim as they stared at the large holomap that displayed the alien fleet's position in real time. The weight of the world was on their shoulders, and their plan for humanity's survival rested on a knife's edge. General Mara Kessler stood at the head of the table, her eyes hardened by the years of war and loss she had witnessed. She had seen cities reduced to ash, families torn apart, and entire nations fall under the boot of the invaders. But through it all, she had never wavered. She knew that the upcoming mission was humanity's last hope. If they could take down the alien mothership, they could cripple the invaders and force them to retreat. But she also knew that the risk was unimaginable. "We have one chance at this," Kessler said, her voice steady but filled with the gravity of their situation. "If we fail, there's nothing left. The alien command structure will remain intact, and the full force of their invasion will come crashing down on us." The room fell silent, each member of the council understanding the magnitude of her words. The plan was simple, but it was far from easy. A small strike team would infiltrate the alien mothership and plant a series of EMP devices at key points within their command center. These devices would disable the mothership's primary systems, causing a cascading failure that would disrupt the alien fleet's coordination and force them into disarray. The strike team would have no backup. The mission was to be a one-way trip. Kessler turned to the head of the Resistance's intelligence division, Lieutenant Ava Singh. Ava's face was pale, but her eyes shone with unwavering determination. She had spent the last few weeks gathering intelligence on the alien flagship's layout, its security protocols, and the weaknesses in its defensive systems. The information she had gathered was invaluable, but even with it, the team was still walking into the heart of the enemy's strength. "We'll be outnumbered and outgunned," Ava said, her voice firm. "The alien forces won't go down without a fight, but we know how to hit them where it hurts." She paused, then added, "We've developed a new form of camouflage technology that will help us slip past their sensors, but it won't last long. Once we're inside, we'll have mere minutes to complete the mission before they realize we're there." The rest of the council listened intently, each one processing the risk and the reward that came with the mission. In the end, they all knew what had to be done. Earth had no more time to waste. Every moment they delayed would cost lives. "The team is ready," Kessler said, her voice unyielding. "We've trained for this. We know the stakes. We'll go in, we'll hit them hard, and we'll get out. And when we do, we'll take the fight to them in ways they never expected." The room filled with the quiet hum of approval. The council members knew that there was no turning back. They had all committed to this cause long ago, but now the final moment had arrived. The fate of humanity rested not on numbers or firepower, but on the strength of a few individuals willing to sacrifice everything for a chance at victory. General Kessler's gaze swept over the room one last time. She saw the fear, the resolve, the pain of loss, and the hope that still flickered in every face. Humanity had endured horrors that no one had ever imagined, but now they had a chance to strike back. They had the will to survive. And that, she knew, was something the aliens could never understand. "It's time," Kessler said, standing tall as the council members prepared to deploy their final strategy. "We make our stand. And this time, the line won't just be crossed, it will be erased, once and for all." The rebel team, handpicked by General Kessler for their unique skills, moved in the dead of night, their hearts pounding as they prepared to embark on the most dangerous mission of their lives. They were no longer just fighters. They were the last hope for humanity. The path ahead was uncertain, and each one of them knew the odds were stacked against them. Inside a stolen alien transport vessel, the team sat in tense silence, their faces lit by the soft glow of the control panels in front of them. The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound breaking the otherwise eerie stillness. Outside the craft, the alien mothership loomed like a dark, foreboding fortress. Its massive structure stretched out, dwarfing the human ship that was attempting to breach its defenses. "I've got eyes on the outer perimeter," Lieutenant Ava Singh said, her voice calm despite the tension. She had been tracking the alien ship's movement for days and had a detailed map of its layout in her mind. "We're entering the final phase. Once we breach, the clock starts ticking. We'll have less than 5 minutes before they realize we're here." "Understood," said Erin, the former soldier-turned-rebel leader, checking his gear for the umpteenth time. He adjusted the EMP devices that they would plant inside the mothership's command center, knowing they were humanity's best shot at crippling the invaders. "Let's make those 5 minutes count." The rest of the team nodded, each of them mentally preparing for what was to come. There was no turning back now. Failure wasn't an option, not just for them, but for everyone left on Earth. They were the tip of the spear, and their mission was about to begin. The alien mothership's surface was unlike anything humanity had ever seen, sleek, metallic, and covered with intricate alien symbols that pulsed with faint light. The rebels' ship, cloaked in the stealth technology they had developed, glided silently toward the surface. As they neared the hull, Erin's breath hitched. Despite the chaos they had endured to get to this point, he couldn't help but be awed by the sheer size and alien design of the ship. But awe had no place in a mission like this. Coming in hot, Erin muttered as he navigated the craft closer to a small maintenance bay hidden beneath the mothership's surface. Ava had located a blind spot in the ship's security, a spot not well guarded. They had to rely on that window of vulnerability. The craft touched down with barely a sound. The hatch slid open, and the team disembarked, weapons in hand. The air inside the mothership was cold and metallic, the silence oppressive. They moved as one, staying close to the walls, using the shadows to their advantage. The alien ship's structure was labyrinthine, but Ava led them expertly, her knowledge of the ship's layout guiding them through narrow corridors and vast chambers. They reached the central command hub in record time, but as they approached the final chamber, the tension was palpable. They were moments away from their objective, but the feeling of being hunted never left them. Each step could be their last. Erin signaled for them to stop, his ears catching the distant sound of alien patrols. He motioned for the team to crouch, blending into the shadows of the corridor. The team held their breath as the footsteps of the patrols grew louder, then quieter as the aliens passed, unaware of the human infiltrators just feet away. "This is it," Kessler whispered, her voice carrying no fear, only resolve. "We plant the EMPs, disable their systems, and get out." The EMP devices were quickly set up at strategic points around the control room. As Erin's hand hovered over the activation button, he glanced at the others. Their faces reflected the gravity of what was about to happen. 5 minutes. That was all they would have before the alarms went off. He nodded to Kessler. She was ready. They all were. With a final press of the button, the EMPs activated, sending a ripple of energy through the ship. The lights flickered, the hum of the ship's engines stuttered, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then a loud alarm pierced the stillness. "Time's up," Ava shouted, As the first wave of alien soldiers arrived, their weapons raised. The team turned and bolted, the chaos of battle erupting around them as they fought their way back to the transport ship. Every second counted now. The fate of humanity rested on their shoulders, and they weren't about to fail. They had made their breach, but the hardest part had only just begun. The chaos erupted as soon as the EMP devices went off. Alarms blared through the alien mothership, and the once silent corridors now buzzed with frantic movement. Aaron's heart pounded in his chest as he led the team down the narrow halls, their steps echoing in the metal maze. The alien soldiers, alerted by the disruption, were pouring into the command center, weapons raised, but the rebels were faster, more agile, and determined to get out alive. The first wave of soldiers was on them before they even reached the exit. Aaron, his pulse racing, grabbed a nearby crate and threw it toward the advancing aliens, momentarily stunning them with the impact. The team took advantage of the opening, firing back with precision. Ava's pulse rifle echoed through the chamber, striking an alien in the chest, while Kessler moved with the grace and speed of a seasoned soldier, her blades slashing through the air to disable another soldier. "We can't stay here," shouted Kessler, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Get to the transport now." The team surged forward, their weapons fending off the aliens long enough to make a break for the maintenance bay. But the mothership's corridors were a twisting labyrinth, and the team was quickly surrounded. Aaron's mind raced as he searched for an escape route. His eyes flicked to the overhead vents, a small maintenance shaft that might just be wide enough for them to squeeze through. "Up," he shouted, pointing toward the vent. The team instantly knew what to do. They scrambled up the walls, climbing into the narrow tunnel just as more alien forces poured into the room. The hatch slammed shut behind them, sealing them off from the enemy, but the sound of pursuit grew louder as the aliens realized where they had gone. "Keep moving," Aaron urged, his voice tight as they crawled through the dark, cramped space. The shaft was claustrophobic, barely wide enough for them to move quickly. They couldn't afford to stop, not even for a moment. Every second they spent inside this vent system was a second closer to the aliens closing in on them. Ava, who had mapped out the ship's layout, led the way, her eyes scanning the dark spaces ahead. "We're close," she said, her voice calm despite the pressure. "Just a few more turns and we'll be at the extraction point." The team followed her, their breath coming in shallow gasps. Aaron could hear the pounding of alien feet outside the shaft, and he knew they didn't have much time. The aliens were relentless, and the longer they stayed inside the mothership, the higher the risk of being caught. He glanced over at Kessler, who was focused, her eyes scanning their rear for any signs of pursuit. "We're not going to make it," muttered one of the engineers, his voice laced with fear. "The EMPs were effective, but we've triggered a full-scale alarm. The whole ship is on lockdown." "Then we'll make our own way out," Kessler replied, her words firm as she pushed forward, determination burning in her eyes. "We've come too far to fail now." Minutes passed, each one feeling like an eternity. The team pushed forward, their movements synchronized as they neared the end of the vent system. Ahead, the faintest light signaled their destination. The extraction point was just ahead, but they knew that time was running out. The alien forces would be ready for them, and the path to their ship was lined with enemies. As they emerged from the vent into the maintenance bay, they saw their transport ship waiting, only it was surrounded by alien soldiers. The rebels had no choice but to engage in one last desperate fight. Aaron's pulse quickened as he surveyed the situation. There was no way they could all make it out unless they created a distraction. "We need to clear the area now," he barked. "Ava, take out their comms. Kessler, cover the rear." The team split into action. Ava darted toward a nearby control panel, her fingers flying across the interface as she disabled the alien communication system. At the same time, Kessler and Aaron created a perimeter, engaging in a fierce firefight with the alien soldiers. Their weapons lit up the room in rapid bursts of energy as the air crackled with tension. The countdown had begun. With each passing second, the ship's internal systems were beginning to stabilize again, and the EMP's effects were waning. If they didn't escape soon, they would be trapped. "Get to the ship," Kessler yelled, firing off another round. "Move, move, move." Erin and the others sprinted toward their transport ship, dodging fire from the alien soldiers. The ship's ramp lowered, and they rushed inside, barely evading the fire of their pursuers. The moment the last of the rebels were on board, the ship's engines roared to life, blasting them into the cold vacuum of space. But they knew it wasn't over. The alien forces were already preparing for their next move. The countdown was ticking down to the final battle. They had made it out, but the war was far from won. The mothership was only one piece of the puzzle, and the invaders weren't going to let Earth slip through their fingers so easily. The true fight for humanity's survival was just beginning. As the rebel ship tore through space, escaping the alien mothership's gravity well, the crew was still reeling from the battle they had just fought. The ship's hull rattled as it picked up speed, the distant explosion of a destroyed alien vessel resonating in the vacuum of space. But amid the deafening silence of the cosmos, the team knew that their work wasn't done, not even close. General Kessler stood at the ship's command console, eyes focused on the stars ahead, her face illuminated by the glow of the navigation screens. Erin was by her side, leaning over a map of their homeworld's last known strongholds, plotting their next moves. Ava, her hands still shaking from the stress of their escape, sat nearby, monitoring the alien fleet's response to the chaos they had caused. "We bought some time," Kessler said, her voice unwavering despite the exhaustion in her voice. "But the aliens are far from defeated. They'll adapt quickly." Erin nodded, gripping the edge of the table. "They'll come after us harder now. We've hit their heart, but they'll regroup. It's not enough to stop them." Ava looked up from her console, her gaze intense. "We've triggered a chain reaction. The mothership is in disarray. If we can keep up the pressure, we can force them into a defensive posture long enough for our allies to hit their supply lines. But we need more time, more leverage." There was a brief pause as everyone on the ship realized the magnitude of the next step. They had made it this far, against all odds, but they couldn't afford to rest. Not yet. Not when the fate of humanity was still hanging by a thread. "We need to strike at the heart of their empire," Kessler said, looking each member of the team in the eye. "We've seen how strong their command is, but we've also seen their vulnerability. Their supply lines, their communications. We'll hit them where it hurts. We go after their central command hub. We don't stop until they're out of options." The room fell silent as the reality of what Kessler was suggesting sank in. It was a final, decisive move, an all-or-nothing strike that could either cripple the invaders for good or wipe out what remained of the human resistance. Erin's voice cut through the silence. "We'll need an army, General. We can't do this alone. Our forces, what's left of them, are scattered and weak." "We'll find a way," Kessler said firmly. "We have no choice." The crew continued to plan, drawing on every bit of information they had gathered during their months of resistance. They located key alien resources and communication points, identifying weak spots in their vast network. Ova worked tirelessly to decrypt the invaders' transmission channels, while Kessler organized the remaining human forces for one final push. A few days later, the rebel fleet, cobbled together from whatever surviving ships and forces they could rally, jumped into the alien-controlled space sector. The invaders were preparing for retaliation, but they weren't ready for this. Not for the wave of humanity's defiance that came charging toward them, united under the banner of survival and revenge. As the rebel ships engaged the alien fleet in a massive space battle, Erin's heart raced. They were outnumbered, but this time, they had the advantage of knowing their enemy's weaknesses. The EMP devices had taught them how to disrupt the invaders' technology. The alien ships, once powerful and terrifying, were now vulnerable. With every strike, every explosion, humanity pushed forward. The final battle wasn't just fought in space. It was fought in the hearts and minds of the humans who stood against the invaders. For every fallen soldier, for every lost city, for every family torn apart, humanity fought not just for survival, but for the future of their world. The alien forces, overwhelmed and unprepared for the Resistance's unity, began to fall back. The command hub, the very core of their empire, was on the brink of collapse. Kessler led her team in one last desperate charge, fighting their way through the heart of the alien fortress, planting explosives and disabling vital systems. When the dust finally settled, the rebel fleet stood victorious, but battered. The alien command structure had been crippled, and the invaders, reeling from their losses, began to retreat. Earth had won, against impossible odds. General Kessler stood on the bridge of the rebel flagship, staring out at the stars, her mind full of the faces of those who had fallen, those who had fought and died for this moment. The battle wasn't over, but humanity had proven one undeniable truth. They were untouchable. And for the first time in years, hope was alive in the hearts of every human still standing. The fight was far from over, but they had shown the universe that the human spirit could never be broken.